As a lawyer, and any lawyer that's been particularly in the litigation background, and I mentioned this earlier, is the dynamic is pretty much scorched earth. Your job is you're a mercenary, and you're there to win your client's case and prevail on the merits or the argument, whichever one you've got, and deliver a particular result for your client. And hostages aren't part of the equation, and leaving trees standing not part of it. This is a whole different environment. Being a general counsel now is where you have to take that sort of fire and brimstone approach. You have to mix that with folks who are trying to get deals done. So if you're the person that always says no, they're not going to like you very much. So one of the things that I've learned since being general counsel is the phrase "the solve." Everybody wants the solve for whatever the situation is. So now I have to come in and say, well, you really can't do X, Y, and Z, comma, but you could do A, B, and C. And that seems to be, the way of getting us to the finish line. So one of the things was really identifying and doing this risk-reward probability versus possibility approach, and being able to deliver a solve to your client in terms of how you can get things done for them, and then to weigh that against what your risks truly are, against the backdrop of what we like to call cowboy law, which is you've got deal guys out there, they're writing up deals on napkins and hieroglyphics. It makes sense to them. We look at it, we have to try and reduce it to a writing.
Now you get to hear my sage experience as general counsel.
Let me have it.
As general counsel for Big Bear Markets, 1981 maybe, the principal of the company comes storming into my office, and he's just really hot under the collar, and he comes to me and he says, I hired you not to tell me I can't do something, but I hired you to tell me how to do it. And it dawned on me, he was right.
That's right.
He was absolutely right. Now, I was, 28, 29 years old.
So it's just a couple of years ago.
Yeah, just a few years
right.
ago. But it was an epiphany for me, so to speak, in that I realized that as general counsel, you can often contribute. I mean, sometimes you're the business person, depending upon the circumstances and the company that you work for, where you can be as much a business person as anybody else, and that's part of the fun of being general counsel.
That's true.
But when you're given deals, your job is not to tell, you're not supposed to say no. As a matter of fact, any transactional lawyer, your job is not to say no. Your job is to say, okay, this is the various ways that we can do this. This way will cost you X amount, and this way will cost you X amount. You tell me what your threshold of pain is.
That's absolutely right.
You get to make the business decision, but I just want you to know that you might not want to take on that much pain.
Howard, you nailed it. You're absolutely right, and that was one of the biggest transitions for me to make. Is we talked about this off mic, but I was a mortgage banker myself for a decade before I went to law school. So for me, the business thing I thought I knew and made sense, but I'd been a lawyer long enough by the time I got to the GC role where I wasn't as much of the business person as I thought I was. And so you're absolutely right. It was a function of my client saying, "Hey, I just want you to know I'm gonna drive under the influence. Your job is to keep me from getting a DUI." So you kind of have to put that in perspective, and to the extent that you have to explain the threshold of pain. I wasted so much of my time and my client's time at the beginning as a GC, trying to explain to my client everything that could go wrong and all the minutia, and I thought I was doing my client a service. Well, my client finally just said, "Look, Derrick, I just need to know what the worst case scenario is and what the likelihood of that happening is." And so I kind of had to completely reapproach my entire process and then go back to really focusing in on what was going to grab my client's attention. So what I would often do, and now sometimes still do this, hopefully my client's not listening, but I will try to figure out what the absolute worst case scenario is in any kind of a situation, and say, well, the worst case scenario is there's going to be an earthquake tomorrow. So, and if you're not protected, that might be a problem. The probability of that happening is relatively low. And now let's talk about some of the minor things like not getting paid, not getting a surety bond, some of the other things. And at least when I did that, I got their attention. attention.
You're talking about the genesis of a general counsel.
That's right. Actually, I am, Howard. That's absolutely right. This is my genesis of my general counsel.
It's very odd. I don't think that many non-lawyers or non-general counsel can appreciate it, but you start making judgment calls.
That's right.
For your client. That's experience, that's understanding what makes sense, what does. So you do make judgment calls. You don't just wipe your hands and say, I'm not part of the decision-making process.
That's right.
Because you end up being a filter.
Yeah, I think I would refer not so much to I think we've gone from the genesis of being a general counsel to the evolution of general counsel.
That would maybe the name of the company should be Evolution Capital.